Morning, everybody. Good to see you all here. The idea today is to signpost you to some of the tools and techniques that may help you in producing those assignments. In manufacturing, we tend to buy stuff. Then, we do stuff to it, using our assets to add value. And after that, we aim to sell at a profit. Sounds really easy. So we use our operational costs, we have our operating costs, and we have our selling price. So, a highly scientific formula. Our profit is whatever we sell for, minus our material and operating costs. And it should be huge profit. So I'm obviously too young to remember this, but I still see one or two senior people in the industry who talk about the grand old days in the 80s when companies were pretty much able to ask that price and the market would pay it within reason. I think increasingly what we are seeing is we're all driven by market price. So we do have a challenging market, a lot of pressure on driving price down, and we also have challenges on increasing internal costs. So we do have a real challenge. And yet the purpose of our industry, our business, is still to make a profit. So what we are left with is trying to improve. On average across the industry, probably the cost of materials or buying stuff accounts for between 50 to 60% of the selling price of a job. The cost of doing stuff, our operating costs, between 30 and 45%. In terms of selling a job, anything between 0 and 10%. Maybe companies will even sometimes go in at a loss because if we win this job, we might win another one. There's more we can go for. And I'm sure you'll see this sort of pricing around the industry from time to time. In terms of buying stuff, we could look to buy that cheaper or use less of it. In terms of what we do, we can look at what we do more efficiently, or we can aim to sell at a higher price. We can look to reduce waste in terms of the amount of material we use, how much actually goes in a bin versus how much of the material you buy actually gets passed on to your customer. In terms of selling at a higher price, we shouldn't shy away from it, but it does tend to be market driven as well, unless we're operating in a real niche. If we talk about operational costs, we probably have finance and loans tied up in a building, in the equipment we have utilities and rent, we have labour costs. Pretty much these are fixed costs. So usually, if we were to have no sales, no orders coming in next week, we would still have certain bills to pay. And then inevitably, no matter how good our processes are, there will be some waste which occurs during the process. Then hopefully, not enough waste that we're still able to make a profit.
So I want to take you through some of the principles and some concepts, okay? First principle, and it's an important one, it's specifying value from the customer's perspective rather than the perspective of the business. Okay, so you're looking at what actually is important to your customer. Steps 2 and 3 are identifying every step within your process and making it flow. We then look at 5C. So this is about how you actually improve your workplace in a structured way. No rocket science, it's just about getting people involved and engaged. We've then got some tools there, TPM, TQM, just in time. And by using all these tools and techniques, we're then looking at how we can improve our quality, cost, delivery and people targets, ultimately in achieving profitability. So fundamentally what we really talk about is best practice. First of all, measure. If we don't measure, we don't know how we can improve. Then communicating where we're actually heading, what we're trying to achieve. Starting off with 5C, bedrock of improvement. Looking at 7 wastes, then using visual management, standardising the way we do things, and hopefully then continually improving. Using this cycle of plan, do, check, act. SDCA to PDCA. What do we mean by SDCA? It's about looking at standardising the way you do things first. If you don't standardise, well then if you're trying to improve something, you may potentially improve chaos. So there you go. In a nutshell, I get the little picture of the doggy. Okay, so don't make waste, don't accept waste, and don't pass it on.
I'm going to talk about the 7 wastes. 7 wastes is a structured routine, a structured way of eliminating those wastes within your business. But value added is something that changes the nature of the product, perhaps of the raw material. And a good example of that is putting ink on paper, or folding, or stitching, or perhaps even creating a quotation for a customer. Then we've got the non-value adding components, but necessary. A good example of this is a make-ready, for instance. A make-ready is necessary to do the task, but actually adds no value. And you could consider that the added value parts is something that the customers are willing to pay for. Lean manufacturing, best practice, is looking at those wasteful activities and trying to eliminate or reduce them. Now actually, if I've got a 10% improvement on my waste, that's going to be far more than a 10% improvement on my value added. So that's the area I would prefer to focus within a business. So the 7 wastes. Our first waste is overproduction. Overproduction is producing more than the customer requires, or perhaps sooner than the customer requires. Inventory. This is the stock moving around your business. Transportation. Transportation is moving things from one end of the factory, taking your job from one part to another, perhaps from warehouse to warehouse. It's particularly moving the product around the business. Waiting. Waiting for material, waiting for paper. You could be waiting for machinery. You could be waiting for staff. Motion. This can be bending, twisting, turning. It can also mean repetitive motion to and from the machine. Over-processing. This is doing something that the customer's not necessarily willing to pay for. So adding a varnish, perhaps you could be doing here. Or perhaps it's additional packaging, putting extra elastic bands around packages and things of that nature. And then defects and spoilage. We consider overproduction to be the mother of all waste because potentially overproduction could lead to every other one of those wastes. We've talked about some other wastes though over and above the 7 wastes that we talked about there. So we've got our new wastes, which are making the wrong product efficiently, untapped human potential, inappropriate systems, waste energy and water, and wasted materials within your processes. Service waste within the offices, incorrect inventory, delays, unnecessary movement, duplication, unclear communication. Now, identifying the waste is very important.
I think the biggest challenge for our industry is to actually empower yourselves, your team leaders, people within your organisations to just go and stand and watch what goes on. You may hear of MUDA, M-U-D-A, Japanese for waste, which is actually just looking at what goes on in a slightly different way. If you look for Kaplan and Norton, they will talk about this idea of a balanced scorecard. We can use KPIs to control. So we can use KPIs to react to anything out of the norm which happens. I think most of our businesses are good at planning. Usually what can happen is we're so busy firefighting and putting problems right, we think we put a problem to bed and we move on to the next problem. So what is really important is to have a check to make sure that what we're doing is right. Is it achieving what we're after? If it isn't, how do we act? Which is that final part of the process to get things back on track. If we are having an improvement we want, how do we act to raise the bar again? So it's all about continuous improvement. From a benchmarking point of view, there is nothing wrong with plagiarising with pride. There is nothing wrong with seeing who's doing things best with this type of kit we've got, who's doing best with similar types of processes. Think, do you measure these in your business? If you do, great. What are you doing to improve them? If you don't measure them, then would it be useful to measure this? So if you're not looking for waste, sorry, labouring that point again, please do. If we can get more output from our existing machinery, anything extra we process through that job goes straight on the bottom line.
We're going to break down the presentation in 2 parts. Part of it is talking a little bit about the site I came from in California, taking all the principles that JP's talked about this morning to improve our site and how we are able to do business. This is what we're going to talk about, a little bit about what we did before Lean, a pilot program we instituted, some of the improvements that we made, and some of the things that we gained by what we did. Before Lean, we had no single point of scheduling. We had our building broken down into several parts, and everybody was scheduling a little bit of their own, and there was a lot of conflict, a lot of infighting between people because there wasn't one single point of scheduling. There was not an effective method to deliver printed output to the machines. So the managers looked at ways we needed to improve this. So we took a very large client, took a core team of people, and they attended a Lean course that was put on by a group called the Lean Enterprise. They built a plan for every part. We took the speed of the machines, how what we had to produce on an hourly basis to meet the turnaround time of that job, and we developed what we needed to deliver to the machine every hour, so the operators would not have to go get the work would be delivered to them. And it would be delivered to them not where they would have a large stockpile of work, they would have enough work at their machine to run for 1 hour. We instituted this pilot program using this customer and about 7 machines, trained the operators, and then we observed the process for about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 30 days. And we've learned a lot during that period. There was a lot of resistance to change, as you can imagine, and we had to make a lot of mid-course corrections to make it work. But the results were operator efficiency up, material storage around the factory was virtually eliminated, and the results confirmed that lean was the way to go. And we have taken this one pilot program with the one customer and put it across all of our customers, where they're all working on a plan for every part and everything is delivered to the enclosing machines. After we did the pilot program, we put together a Kaizen event. We had a goal from our MD to increase our efficiency for these MPS machines for what they were at about 38%, to get them up to about 55 to 60% efficiency. And we're able to not only get it to 55%, but we are over to 60% efficiency by getting the operators in a room, using the operators to help develop a process. We put together a parts supermarket. The parts supermarket has a day's worth of material in it. They take that material and they deliver it to the machine every hour, so the operator has everything he needs and he doesn't run out for an hour's time. So what was gained? The efficiency went to 55%. Materials handled increased their volume by 35%. The special handling, which is much like the bench or a handwork area, they increased their parts per labor hour by 30%. Operator frustration for not running out of parts was virtually eliminated. They didn't run out of things that they needed. Everything was delivered to them and they could turn around and it was right there. 50% gain in packages per hour, 62% increase in statements per hour, and a 71% increase in machine runtime.
We invited Vision Imprinting to start off a 5C exercise, and I unknowingly put my hand up to give it a go. Really enjoyed it and was offered the chance to get more involved with 5C in the other departments. DST bought us as a company, and then here we are. I work next to Mr. Swanson day to day now. Our original goals were to improve quality, improve productivity, improve profit, and to attract more custom. That was the norm. No one even questioned it. Dara and our MD gave us the opportunity to brainstorm a better workflow, and this was the idea. So print up the top there, then it goes into finishing, then in closing, then ultimately out the door. So a natural flow. So the tools we introduced, 5C, JP touched on OEE, we're heavily involved in OEE, total productive maintenance and product flow. We began 5C in training in all areas. We introduced a weekly walk where all the department managers put on their high vis and walk around other departments. Like I say, the monthly audit, all these audit results for TPM, 5C, OE, they're all put on department boards and site displays. After we had a good bedrock of 5C, we wanted to move on to OEE. So again, we asked Vision Print to come in. It's been a long, arduous process. Then we moved on to TPM. Each machine on the shop floor has a TPM book, a schedule where they have daily, weekly, monthly and annual tasks. And we use value stream mapping. It's amazing when you take a job or a client and you start using a post-it note for every step of a process. If you used one colour differently for a step that the customer would be willing to pay for, you could have 1,000 steps and then there's one, and that's only that one that the customer wants to pay for. And it is unbelievably eye-opening when you get a team of people that only look at blinkered in their section and you look at the whole process or a client's work and you think only that one step and you try and eliminate all the others. It is a biggest eye-opener I've had in Lean. And ultimately our results from our original goals. We now have more clients than ever. We increased our volume, more packs mailed out than ever. We are now profitable. We increased opportunities for investment, and as a site we can be proud of it. Buy-in is a key ingredient to any successful implementation. It's okay for me and Dara to go in and say, right, you need to do this. You may steer them in a direction that you want them to, but ultimately they got there themselves, they're more likely to buy in.
So the definition of process mapping is all those steps that it takes to produce a product from customer through to delivery. And it can be the interaction between customers and suppliers, but actually it can extend further. It can include your entire supply chain. It also includes the customer inquiry all the way through the process of quoting. The whole cycle, in effect. Understanding each process flow and making that run as smoothly and as fast as possible. So what ideally you want is your information to come into your business without any delays inside your business, and making your materials flow through your business so you're not creating work in progress and inventory and so on and so forth. How much of that process there is your customer willing to pay for? So a good starting point is to recognise what's going on in your business, and then you can actually focus on the areas that perhaps will add value and actually help your business. The first thing that you need to do is look at where we are now. What are we doing? And you can identify where the wastes are, where the non-value-added activities are, and where the value-added activities are. Where do you want to take the business? How do you want the business to operate in the longer term? And from that, you can actually measure the improvements that you make. So what is a project, a task or a scheme that requires a large amount of time, identifiable objectives, conducted by identifiable person or a group of people, usually a series of tasks, and those tasks are time limited. A project should have an end date.
Now, who's heard the term Gantt chart before? Typically used in big projects and installations I've used in the past. What you're looking for there is listing out all the key tasks that are required, the time frame that you need to do it, who's responsible, and ultimately you can then identify the critical path, what are the key milestones we need to achieve. Other types of planning, you've got other different types of charts you can use. On the left there is just a key milestone plan where we need to have certain activities completed by. And the one on the right, again, is a different type of Gantt chart, breaking down the activities and when things need to be done. Who's heard of A3s? Yeah. Okay, so it's not just a sheet of A3 paper or a chart, it's actually a method of actually running your project. And the reason why it's called an A3 is because you actually have it on an A3 sheet. The purpose of it is making it easy to explain to your colleagues, quick to understand, and it summarises one project in one document. It forces the focus to be on the most important steps within the project. It's easy to update and maintain. It's a compact storyboard. You can have it on a board and anybody can go up to it and actually understand what is going on and where a project's at. And it follows plan, do, check, act. So again, probably a key theme coming out of today is PDCA.
There's a lot more to it than we've covered today, but the important thing, as with all of this, is back to JFDI, so just do it, have a go. Okay, so on to structured problem solving. Really, it gives us, as it says, a structured approach to identifying and implementing improvements. If all of a sudden you go to people and say, actually, we want your ideas to improve, it can be quite frightening for people who've been used for decades in some cases to go into their senior management and having every decision made for them. Write down fishbone diagrams. Once again, go to business balls, Wikipedia, have a look for that. And it's really good for capturing people's ideas for improvement. So what is good is using creative silence. And what we typically do, we would give out a pile of post-it notes, ask each person to write down any cause, so that no hot water in a tea break. What could be causing that? I think there were questions about how you can quantify improvements, when there's less movement, less travelling. Well, actually, it should reflect in the measures. So, for example, guys at the OEE, if we can break that down and find out how much time we're losing, waiting for materials, etc., we can go away and break down what we think the causes are and actually go and find out for definite what is causing the problems. We also can then use a technique known as a 5 whys. And the whole principle of this is you ask why once, and you might, well, because it is. No, but really, can you explain to me why? Well, it's because, yeah, but tell me a bit more. And it's just a way of gently probing more and more to really find out what the root cause is. So 8D doesn't stand for 8 different things beginning with D, like a lot of these things do. It is about having 8 disciplines, so having a very methodical, structured approach to improving. I think some of you were at earlier workshops where we talked about KPI boards. Yeah, so the best place for having KPI boards is actually in the workplace, and also they can work as a great source of communication. So communication we find is the biggest challenge for many organisations. Also, what is really important is agreeing what you need in order to have a constructive meeting and actually have it ready.
Ease of implementation I find is quite an interesting one, because people think it's very easy just to introduce a change and people will take to that change for all the right reasons. Ease of implementation actually involves people, and actually getting things changed through people is quite difficult. However, change is very important to our businesses to keep changing and keep evolving. It's the only constant we face in business. So, how about the effect on an organisation? Well, typically we see that the senior management is isolated from what that change means to the individual. And conversely, at the bottom of the rung, the workforce are concerned about what it means to them. So here's our ingredients, but if we haven't got a sense of urgency, typically we see there's no priority or little action to what we're doing. Where we've got no willingness to change, there's a denial. And if any of those ingredients are not in place, then it usually falls. It usually falls by the wayside. And actually, if you're working in a company that restricts that innovation and creativeness, change will never happen because people are frightened to.
Now, I'm going to talk about middle managers. Industry in general, where do most middle managers come from? Shop floor. Doesn't necessarily mean they've got the natural skill set to be a manager. Okay, so they need to be given a set of tools to help them with that communication process. Now that may be coaching skills, it may be influencing skills, it may be feedback skills. Typical workforce, 20% of your people are the ones that are driving the business. I like to call them fixers. They're the ones stood at the front, they're the ones that always want to get involved, they're the ones that actually drive the way we're going to improve. On the other end of the scale, we've got those people who resist, who I call assassins. They're quite happy to sit back and take pot shots, the snippy comments. And then you've got the people in the middle, the hedgers, sitting on the fence and waiting for which side's going to win, the fixers or the assassins. What happens to individuals and teams when they're going through change? So we get certainty. People don't understand. You've got people who actually switched on, they can see the way through it, and then they hit a few roadblocks and think, actually, this ain't going to work. And then once they start to see some small successes, some wins, people start to have hope and then get confidence.
Culture versus change. What is culture? Perhaps it's your beliefs, perhaps it's your values. What do you think? Perhaps it's the way you behave, your behaviours within the business. So all of the things that you've got on your iceberg are the behaviours within the company. There's our behaviours, and typically of an iceberg there's so much more underneath than actually what you see above the surface. And if we want to change the culture of the business, we need to be looking at changing the behaviours within your business. So unless behaviour changes, nothing changes. That's the culture within your business, that's what we need to change. So successful change, it requires communication, it requires feedback, reinforcement and support, repetition, plan, do, check, act. I think we said that a few times now, haven't we?
Of companies that try and implement lean or continuous improvement, whatever you call it, probably half of the ones that try it, you would go back into and not see a great deal of evidence of any improvement activity having gone on. So it will not guarantee success unless you've got a culture in place. What also is important is having a focus on activities. The biggest challenge is freeing people's time up to do this. BOHICA, has anybody heard of this thing? BOHICA? And this BOHICA stands for bend over, here it comes again. Yeah, and that's all about initiative weariness. So, my idea is that if somebody comes in and starts talking about this new technique, TPM, isn't it brilliant? I'm going to keep my head down, and if I'm a bit savvy about it, hopefully this grenade of sort of doing TPM, pulling teams together, that's going to land on Christian's desk. Some companies do have this sort of initiative weariness where people think, I'll just keep my head down because it'll blow over and we'll go back to how we were in a few months' time. So what is important, if we just drive ahead with these tools and techniques, they're brilliant, but if there's not that underlying culture to support it, then it will die on its backside, for want of a better phrase, because people will see that there is not time to do this, it's not being backed up, so we say one thing and do another. Your workforce will be very savvy to that. So really what we do need to do is create this idea of a dual approach. So if we don't have leadership, commitment and understanding, these tools and techniques are going to die. And that is what we see, totally honest, in a lot of companies that try this. If they don't change how senior management do things and how we've always done things, we'll continue to get what we've always had. And that is the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. I hope you've enjoyed your day. But I really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, which is the biggest thing that goes on here. So some of you have picked up ideas from each other, and that's the greatest value, I think, of any of this type of thing. Do your homework, and I look forward to seeing you all next year. Thanks very much, guys.